Welcome to Impact. I'm Philip Morris, CEO at Proctors, and the interviewer for the art segment. Today our guest is Michael Tuck, who is an architect with Balzer & Tuck out of Saratoga. So how did you become an architect?
Knew that question was coming.
It had to come, right?
Still,
Well,
yeah,
you always wonder how people get wherever they are.
Yeah, it's for me probably not as glamorous. There's no romantic story. It's more about an early appreciation for mathematics and art, and how do you combine those two? And then as it developed, realizing that there's a social component, a people end to it, that just made it really exciting. So that's
So what's your math head? Where does the math part come from?
Well, it's when, in the sort of the elementary school level, there's a lot of concepts that were tough to grasp for me. But math was something that it was, it's regimented, and there's rules, and you can kind of build on things and understand it even as a young developing mind. So that always interested me, never really excelled at it, I wouldn't say, but it was always something that I could fall back to. So that's where the math end of it comes in. And then as it progressed into high school, we got into understanding geometry and algebra and some fascinating things that you could do mathematically. And so that poked an interest, and then my family's always had an art bent to it. My father went to art school, my grandfather was a designer for a studio in New York and things like that. So it worked well for me. It was a good fit. And my brother's also in architecture out in Massachusetts. So maybe,
That's cool.
Yeah, maybe it has something to do with upbringing and breeding. I don't know.
Yeah. A little bit of DNA and a little bit of the world.
A little bit.
So was there a moment when you went, I want to be an architect?
No, I think thinking back on it, there were fleeting fantasies of being a cowboy ranch hand as a young kid, the fireman and all that stuff. But when it became serious, there was never anything else. There was no other. Maybe law would be a good thing for me, or maybe medicine. They didn't really appeal to me. They never sparked my interest. I never had any role models there. So architecture just made sense. It fit, and it was easy to focus on.
Well, when you mentioned the civics part, you said
Yep.
people. I think you mean it in a broad sense.
Both in a broad sense. The architecture is a kind of a unique arena in that we get to have a hand in shaping the current state of neighborhoods, whether it's residential or downtowns. You get an opportunity to do monuments. I mean, the impact that you can have is broad-based and can be sort of a generalized thing. But then there's also, on the residential end of it specifically, there's relationship that you develop with clients, and you get to meet them, you get to find out how they live, what their interests are, what their particular tastes are, and you almost adapt their sensibilities, and that's fun. You live in their shoes for a little bit, so that part of the profession is very rewarding for me. You get to go on. It's a short turnaround too. A residential design process for us it could be 3 months, could be a year before they start building. So you're only a part of somebody's life for a little bit, but you get to impact it greatly.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a challenge. It's fun. It's rewarding.
So when you must be part of an AIA, an architects group, and
Yep.
you meet.
Yep.
What do architects? How do you describe to one another the state of your profession?
It's the state of the profession, sort of. I guess I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not even sure what I'm asking, but let me take another
Yeah.
path at it, because it seems to me like, and maybe this isn't true, but that the world of design is bifurcated, almost like America's bifurcated,
Yeah.
and there's the what do you mean you want to design it? Let's just build it.
Yeah.
And a great desire to build something with meaning.
Sure.
And those two things are more divided than ever. Maybe not, though. Maybe that's not the case.
No, I would agree with that, particularly in our area. You know, other parts of even New York State that I've worked in there's more of a tradition of, if you're going to commission something to be built by a builder or something, that the design professional is coming along with that, whether it's an architect or if it's, you know, somebody with a history of designing successful projects. You know, so that's sort of a known step. Whereas up here, it's much more practical. It's, I have a problem that I need a building, and how am I going to solve that problem? And so we become, from my perspective, more of a necessary step, and I've heard it referred to as the necessary evil, you know, because there's fees, there's timelines, there's, you know, it's almost like bringing a committee on board, you know, where you have to, it's viewed as having to subject your needs as a client or owner and your budget to somebody else's whim, you know. So there's definitely a negative connotation that goes along with that, but I don't see it justified. You know.
Do you end up spending a fair amount of time teaching your client how to be a client then?
Yeah, it starts over every time. You know, we have some clients that we have repeat relationships with, developer clients and things like that, and then we teach them what we can provide, but they also teach us that they may not need all of that, you know. So as those relationships mature, our approach to those projects change, you know. So that's interesting to look back on, and, you know, how could we have done it better each time? But then more with the one-off projects, whether it's a private person building an office or something like that. It's, you know, the initial, right off the bat, we sit them down and you have to walk them through the process. And our office, I don't know if every office is the same, but we've really, maybe it gets back to my mathematics a little bit, but we've come up with a structure for every project, you know, and we spell it out to everybody that this is what's going to happen during this time frame, and this is the information you're going to give us, and this is the information we're going to give back to you. You know, so it's fairly basic. And then we start off every project the same way, and then they kind of wander.
Travel their path.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and that's where it gets to be fun, because, you know, we have almost like waypoints along the journey that we need to hit, but we'll go along for the ride, you know, as long as everybody's willing.
So when you drive through the capital region, where are you from before?
Born in Connecticut.
Where in Connecticut?
Sherman.
Oh,
it's a
yeah.
small sort of near Danbury.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm from New Haven. When you drive through the capital region, what visually makes your brain explode?
Explode? I for explosions, you know, I take that as you know, it relates to pain. You know, there's a lot of pain from a design standpoint up here. A lot of stuff happens very quickly, and you know, I think that it's not afforded the time to plan it properly, and you know, you see a wave of people. There's a demand, and whether it's a condominium or if it's an office or a medical park or something, you know, it's like, I've got to get it in the ground and make it so that I can generate income off this property as quick as possible. You know, so it's not about the parties that were involved or capabilities or anything like that. It's just, there's a lot of sort of bland, poorly sited buildings around that don't really help any communities or anything. Some of the smaller areas, Saratoga's pretty good about it. You know, I mean, there's a process that maybe is too political, but there's at least there's a process set up where you have to go through the steps, and it slows the process. It slows the construction down a little bit, but everybody has to take a pass. You know, you have to think about the sidewalk. You have to think about the pedestrian. You know, so talking about exposure, you know, 4 lanes of road and then, you know, another couple hundred feet of parking lot on either side. It just doesn't say to me, let's hang out here for a little while.
Yeah. Well, you know, having worked in Schenectady, you get it. There's a point at which the community is going, any development is good development.
Yeah.
And then there's a moment when suddenly it's no, good development is good development.
Yeah.
But that's
two
it's
very
a breaking
different
point.
discussions. Yeah, yeah, and it's hard for me to say, hold on, I know you're an economic engine here, but think about it 100 years from now or even 40 years from now, is it the right thing? Because if you make them take that time, there's another town that's not going to, and they'll get it going. You know, so it's a balance, and yeah, you think about knowing I was coming here, you know, thinking about it being an art segment, and I always had this notion of the artist as being this person that just sort of creates things quickly, you know, like you don't make mistakes, you know, there's David and it's perfect, but you know, as I matured or in the process of maturing through this profession, I realized that there's a lot of rubble on the floor, you know, and I think it was frustrating to not get it right the first time when we just started out. But now I don't want to say that we're willing to accept the development that may not be right. You know, we still try to get to the right solution, but we're willing to understand that it has to be, you know, just so. You know, it's not perfection that we're going for, but it has to have the right amount of thought given to it, and it has to respond to everybody's needs. It has to be quick enough to be viable. It has to be thoughtful enough to be sustainable. You know, and it's a trick. And you know, people that get a lot of development work done, I commend them, because it's a heavy lift. You know, and I don't have the grit to get that done. Love to be a part of it, but you know, I don't know.
So when you drive around, what in the Capital Region just makes you glow with happiness? You look at something and go, that's fabulous.
Yeah, you know, there's I think downtown Schenectady has got a texture to it that's wonderful. You know, there's a bit of grit that's probably not comfortable for everybody, but the potential is there. You know, I think Glens Falls is another place that, you know, you go into these downtown Troy. I don't know, those places they have a density that says, okay, there's a pulse that's going to work, and you know, if we can make sure that there's that engine, the economy there to help it, you know, let them come in, but not develop it so fast that it turns into a big stucco kind of box, nondescript. There's a lot of almost like Phoenix that shows up in developments in the area that hurts, but places like Schenectady and Troy and Glens Falls have, whether they've been overlooked or saved some other way, you know, I don't know, but I think that the future, long term from a design point of view, is much richer in those areas, provided they don't get a bubble. You know, bubbles seem to not do well for downtowns in the long run. I don't think. But
So if you were to if you were to be willing to express the project you would most love to do, what might it be? What would it be?
I always wanted to do a lighthouse. You know, because you know,
you live in a rough place for that.
I live here. There's not a lot of shipping. Perhaps Lake Champlain or something. But you know, as short of a period as my architectural schooling was in my overall life, you know, it's a 5-year program at the time. It's very much about they kind of drive into this notion of signature architect, design architect, signature building kind of stuff. And so for me, there's always been this one, that lighthouse is the one structure that is about itself. You know, I mean, office buildings, things like that, generally should be part of a backdrop, be good neighbors. A lighthouse is a beacon, you know.
Well, I have to tell you, there's a great B&B in the lighthouse on the Hudson.
Oh yeah?
It's just 2 rooms, and it's well worth spending the night. I loved it.
Oh,
And, you know, just below the lighthouse level, you could walk up to the lighthouse level for a cocktail, you know. And it's just 2 rooms, but it's nice to live in one, you know.
Yeah, they're neat. I mean, I don't collect like images of lighthouses or anything, and I'm not saying that that's the, you know, the brick and mortars of a lighthouse is the end all of design. It's just the idea of creating that. And churches are similar, you know. If we were still in the you know, in the 1600s or something, where it was all about the flying buttress and everything else, I think that a church would be a fantastic thing to do, because, you know, it's there's a bigger thing going on there, you know. I think some of the museums now try to aspire to that, but that one's a tough one. If you're going to spend, you know, $3 billion on a building to house artwork for people to see, and then suggest that they pay $60, $80 to see that.
Yeah.
That one doesn't sit well with me. I love the buildings, and I love the opportunity to create like an icon for a city, but I think there's something socially wrong with.
Yeah, no, I get it.
With that. But a lighthouse, who could argue with a flamboyant
Well, maybe we
lighthouse?
need one someplace. I don't know. Well, think about it.
You let me know. Yeah, I'm on it.
Thank you, Michael, for joining us. Our guest is Michael Tuck from Balzer & Tuck Architects out of Saratoga. It's been a great conversation with him. I'm Philip Morris. Thank you for joining us at Impact. Proctors, bringing the best in arts, education, and entertainment.